There's two pieces to the puzzle. One is to get out of the thinking activity, right? In order to get out of the thinking activity, you not only have to recognize it, right? Recognize it. In other words, you have to notice there's a voice in my head talking. If you identify with it, you can't get out of it because you're being that. You can't. You have no place to see it from when you're being that, right? Yeah. So one part of it is to recognize the thinking activity, and then another piece of it is to recognize the content of the thinking activity, because the thinking activity in and of itself is not the problem. It's the fact that a large percentage of the thinking activity is egocentric. It's just about me. It's what I want. It's what I need. It's what I don't want. It's if you pay attention to the default state, if you pay attention to the thinking activity, it will teach you about it just by watching, just by paying attention. And most importantly, it'll teach you about its destructive effects. Because if you're in the thinking activity and you're angry and your perceptions are distorted and you're in the fight-flight mechanism, then you will do damage. Then there'll be consequences to that in terms of what you say and what you do. And it doesn't even have to involve other people, it can just involve you. You could hate yourself, you could argue with yourself, you could punish yourself, you could disrespect yourself. So the recognition of the content of the thinking activity is important, because when that activity is practical and useful, then it's serving its purpose. Then the mind's working for you. When it's not practical and useful, then it's sucking energy from you, and it has no practical application. It's not useful. At very best, it's a preoccupation with an illusion. At the very best, it's a preoccupation with an illusion. What does that mean? It means that when you're thinking about yourself, the self you're thinking about is only being produced by that process that you're involved with. When you're thinking about yourself, the self that you're thinking about is actually being processed while you're thinking about it. That's how the personality maintains its existence, is by continuing to present you with an illusion, an illusory idea about something that you are, and you identify with that. You give your identity to that. You give your identity to the thinker. You give your identity to the feeler of the emotions, right? And once you give your identity to that, that lives your life. That lives your life. And for almost everybody, the idea that you're giving your identity to that is not recognized. Rather than you're giving your identity to that, what is seen to be the case is you're learning about yourself. If you know that an illusion is an illusion, it's not an illusion. If you know that a mirage is a mirage, it's not a mirage. So it opens up a different field of possibility, It's not that the idea that you identify with something that is not only not really you, but much smaller than the real you, right? Much more selfish and greedy than the real you. And that's not, and I'm not saying that as a detrimental thing. The idea that you're a physical body and that your personality brings with it selfishness and greed, because you're separate from everybody else and there's not enough for all of us. So if you're going to be in this world, you're playing the game of getting as much as you can. And that's not a bad thing, that's an understandable way to behave in the world, right? That's one of the reasons why when we talk about the truth, and the truth is that your awareness itself, that's such an elusive thing for most people. Well, what do you mean I'm awareness? How do I identify that? Right? It has no form, has no shape, right? So there is a understandable reaction to being yourself. There's an understandable reaction because according to the way the personality thinks, you can't be nothing. That's crazy. You can't be nothing, you know? Your whole life is based on that you're a thing. Your whole life is based on that you have a physical identity, you have a body, you're a body. And your whole life is based on the idea that you are a unique personality, and that you have talents and skills, you know what I mean? And you have things that are going for you and things that are not going for you. You may be lucky enough to be born with an attractive body, according to the standards that we judge bodies by, because that's changing all the time, right? If it was the Renaissance and you're fat, you're attractive, right? If you're during the Renaissance, a woman who is fat is attractive, right? Somebody who would be a perfect model today would be considered ugly during the Renaissance. So the standards change, right? And so if you happen to fit the standards in terms of your appearance, then you have the good fortune of having the benefit of that. But it gets interesting because even if you are lucky enough to have an attractive body, right? And the worst case scenario of this is with women, you know, who are emaciated, but considered beautiful and attractive because that's the standard, right? And then, because that's the case and because that's a strong card in their suit, right? That's a strong suit for them as their physical appearance, right? That they then feel that there is a big gap between that and their psychological and emotional identity because it can't compete with their appearance, right? And so now they feel not so good about themselves, right? But I have this winning card to play anyway. Right? But then it gets worse because anybody that's attracted to my body probably doesn't give a shit about me. You see how this goes bad fast? It's like the Marilyn Monroe syndrome. You know what I mean? That whatever you identify with determines your success or failure. If you identify with your body and you're a beautiful woman, then you can get in the door with that, right? But once you're in the door, you know, once there has to be more than a physical appearance in order to qualify for a successful relationship, then there's a problem with that. And it gets confusing for anybody that's related to somebody who's physically attractive because they can't understand. What the hell are you so neurotic about? Look at yourself. Look in the mirror. You should be, you know, having a great time here. What's going on, right? So you can see how twisted it can get and how confusing it can get in terms of your identification with certain elements or aspects of your identity. The physical body, somebody who identifies themselves with their intellect is in the same situation, right? You know, because outside of a situation where intellect is the thing that, you know, is being defined. You know, if that person who defines himself as an intellect is very bright, right? In the right environment, that works, right? If they're in an academic environment, that works, right? But if you take that same person and put them in a social environment, it doesn't work. You see what I'm saying? But the thing about it is that if you then, through the recognition that these ways of being in the world are limited and don't work in the long run, they fail in the long run. Through that recognition, whether it's your physical body, whether it's because you're intellectually smart, whether it's because you figure, well, I'm not intellectually that smart, I'm not all that beautiful, but if I work hard, make a lot of money, I can be rich. And then I'll have that going for me, right? I'll have money, and everybody likes money, right? So you can see the way the game's played by the ego, right? It uses whatever it can, right, to attach itself to in order to have it be acceptable, to have it be attractive, to have it be something that can work in a social interaction, right? Now, if you really pay attention and you recognize that this is an unworkable reality, it's an unstable situation, it cannot produce what you want out of it. It's not ever going to produce a consistent sense of well-being. It's not ever going to produce a sense of feeling at home and ease with yourself. It's not ever going to produce it, right? And so at some point, if you recognize that, and because you recognize that, you stop putting your gas in that gas tank, you know? you stop putting your money in that bank, right? And you start looking for the opportunity to experience yourself as what you actually are. I mean, if you've had the blessing of coming in contact with the Dharma, with the truth, with the teaching, right? Then there becomes this possibility. Oh, maybe if that's what I really am, I can be free and liberated from the limitations and the failures of the identity that I thought I was. And that's true, right? Because the awareness can, the awareness can relate to everything. The awareness can relate to everything. The awareness is free to be happy without a reason. It's free to not chase happiness, but just experience that it's a natural state, right? So it's a whole different paradigm. It's a whole different reality. And when you come in contact with it and when you see the possibility, there's an obvious and natural attraction to it. Who could not want that? Who could not want that? In fact, one of the reasons that a lot of people don't invest in it is because they think it's too good to be true. It's too good to be true. You're telling me that if I fully realize what I am, that I won't die? You're telling me that if I fully realize what I am, I'll just be naturally happy? You're telling me that if I fully realize who I am, that I won't have to be so neurotic and be constantly trying to fix myself and improve myself and be more acceptable and all the rest of it, and the anxiety and the depression? But it's true, you know, if you start to disengage from the thinking activity and you're suffering from anxiety or you're suffering from depression, right? What you're literally doing is, instead of I am depressed or I am anxious, right? That's the identity. That's identifying with the thought process, right? I am anxious. And you're being the anxiety. You're identified with it, or you're being the depression, identified with it. If you start to break that up, right, and start to slow down and look at it and see it for what it really is, no, it's just a series of thoughts that you're identified with, right? The thoughts may be thoughts that are depressing thoughts, right, like hopelessness, you know, or a sense of futility. Nothing ever works out, nothing ever will work out, you know, that's the beginning of a depression, right? But if you understand, that's all constituted in thought. That's all constituted in thought. And it generates a cyclical reality. If I think depressing thoughts, right, then I feel listless and less energy, right? Then I feel depressed, and then I go into this condition of depression, right? However, if through the practice you understand how things work and you begin to recognize when you're going into a negative thought process, right? And you move your attention away from that and you deprive it of the energy it needs to exist, right? The depression or the anxiety, whatever the condition is that you're suffering from, can't continue to exist because it's getting generated in thinking. Well, the thing to do first is to notice what is you, because there's no game without that. You see what I'm saying? If the only way you know yourself is through a conceptual understanding, you haven't gone anywhere. That's just a different version of a personality. It's a conceptual understanding. That's what a personality is, right? No, but what we're saying here, no, what we're talking about here is there's a real you. There's a real you that's always been the real you, that's always been here, right? That's always been in the background being ignored, right? Because of the fact that it's transparent and formless, right? Doesn't show up, right? Because it doesn't show up, we figure it doesn't exist. That's the way people, that's the materialist view, right? If I can't see it and I can't measure it and it doesn't show up, it doesn't exist. Well, therefore I don't exist, right? It doesn't go down that way, but that's the way it is, right? So the first thing you have to do is experience the truth, not conceptually, right? Experience the truth, meaning what you have to do is you have to look at the awareness and recognize it. Look at the awareness and recognize it. It's always here, right? And, I say that as someone who has recognized it, right? Yes. But for people who have recognized it, we tend to take it, we tend to see it as a relatively easy thing to do, right? For people who don't recognize it, it ain't so easy to do, right? Because the preoccupation with thinking, the preoccupation and the identity with the body and the personality is so prevalent. It's so prevalent that they can't get out of it. You can't get out of it, right? And so because you can't get out of it, it uses you to talk. It uses you to talk. You see it here all the time. I've tried to point it out. When somebody's asking a question, it's so obvious that even the way the question is constructed makes it obvious where the question's really coming from. So the first and foremost thing, and the most important thing, is to wake up. And what I mean by waking up is to recognize what's real. Recognize the awareness that is obvious and always present. It need not be a matter of it having to have a form, because the way you recognize who you are is more powerful than seeing it, because the only possible way to recognize who you are is being it, not seeing it. If you look at your awareness and you see it, right, you didn't actually see it because it wasn't separate from you to see, right? That's just language, right? But when you look at the awareness and you see it, you're actually experiencing being it. That's what you're doing, because that's the only way you can experience who you are, is to be it, because you are it, and you can't see it. So we say look at it, but the looking at it is just a matter of directing attention, right? But if you direct your attention at the source of your awareness, or you direct your attention at your awareness, right? That once that attention makes contact with the awareness, it's a be, not a see. It's an experience of what you are. That's why when people have a recognition of that, after struggling so hard to have a recognition of it, and then all of a sudden it just happens spontaneously, they start to cry. It's a moving experience to be what you are, because it is so inherently satisfied. It's so inherently already fulfilled. It doesn't need anything. It doesn't want anything. It's not going anywhere. It doesn't have an appearance. So this is really, the ultimate freedom, the ultimate experience of being free. Because what we're talking about here is not waiting till then. No, die now. Do it now. You can do it now. What happens when the body dies can be something you do now, right? Because the only possible death is the death of who? The person. That's the only possibility for death, is the death of the person. So why wait? Get it over with. See what it would be like on the other side now. You know what I mean? There's all this talk about, life after death. Well, you don't have to wait till the body dies. If you want to find out about life after death, die now and see what happens. That'll be life after death. It really literally is the same thing. All we're talking about here is to move the death date up closer to now, right? Instead of waiting until then. You can do it. You can do it. All you have to do is take this process seriously, because when you practice meditation, you're weaning yourself off being a person. You're weaning yourself off it. And if you stay with it and you understand it and you do it correctly, eventually you'll have had enough weaning off. There'll be enough location of your identity in awareness, right? That will then become obviously the attractive experience of being you, because it feels good to be you. It's like I say, that's why people, when they practice meditation and they do it consistently, right, and they have the recognition of their true nature, right, near the end of their life, all they want to do is go somewhere and be alone and meditate. All they want to do is experience this fulfillment without any, breaks in it, So that's why people go to these hermitages and be alone and just be in the direct experience of the reality of who they are. There isn't anything more fulfilling There isn't anything more fulfilling. And once that's recognized, and once you're situated as that, once you know yourself as that, then you can go on and play the game of life and be the person, but you don't take it very serious. You don't take it seriously. That's what Paul Hederman means by traveling lighter. You don't take it that seriously. It's the same thing as Douglas Harding said, that once he woke up and he knew the truth, it was little Douglas that continued to live his life. He wasn't that. Little Douglas was the personality that he was being in the world as, little Douglas. And little Douglas had quirks, and little Douglas, from time to time was a problem, like a child. But you see, there's a big difference between being a child and trying to live in the adult world. Well, it's not really an adult world because everybody's being a child. Most people are being children. So it's just like a playground, children's playground, except the things that they can use to fight with include nuclear weapons. But that's the game that's getting played, So, but the difference is, instead of being a child, trying to deal with the world, right, and trying to find meaning in life and to be happy, and so instead of being a child, now you can shift to being adult that has a child. The child may be what is manifesting or how I show up in the world, right? But now I am not the child. I am the awareness that has a child and can influence the child and can operate through the child in life. And that's a whole new ballgame. It's a whole new ballgame. And as you get better and better and more sophisticated at using what they call skillful means in Buddhism, right? What skillful means is when you're awake and you can pay attention and watch how the personality is functioning, right? You can intervene when it's going off the rails. You can stop its mouth from causing trouble. You can stop its behavior from causing destruction and negative consequences. And you can, as the senior, as the adult in the room, right, you can begin to corral the behavior of the adolescent personality or the infantile personality. You can begin to corral that, and you can begin to replace it with realistic options like unconditional love. And you can begin to practice compassion and unconditional love. And that could take the rest of your life, right? But that will be a life well lived. It'll be a life well lived. Because as you do these practices and as you become more receptive and open, as you express more unconditional love, your relationships will be satisfying. People will be drawn to you, and you will experience a quality experience of being alive. That's when the death of the body comes, if you have lived your life that way, it's a wonderful opportunity to take a good rest, right? But the resting in peace can start right now. It doesn't have to be on the other side of the end of the body. It can start right now. You can be resting in peace now. You don't have to have it on your tombstone. One of the things that happens if you die before the body, right, is that the way things occur for you changes. The way things occur for you is less solid. People are less real. Because, this is an appearance. That's part of what we're learning. This is an appearance. You actually begin to see it as an appearance. You actually begin to see, we talk about thy will be done, that everything's predestined. You're actually able to watch that be the case. That all of the conditions that exist are the conditions that are the cause for the next effect. And then that effect becomes the conditions that cause the next effect, and you can watch it go like that, right? And what happens is the substantiality of reality and the substantiality of other people starts to lessen, so that they're not as real, they're not as substantial as they were before. And the other thing is you can see through the person at the self. When you're with people, you can be aware of the self in the person. So the person can misbehave and you don't take it personally because that's just the person, right? They can misbehave and you're a lot more patient with it, right? And they can misbehave and they can behave in ways that are their patterns, right? And you are less likely to judge and evaluate them based on that, right? Because everybody's got strong suits and weak suits, right? How easily we use the way other people are, the way they talk, the way they behave, what they do, what they don't do, to judge and evaluate them and then hold that against them, right? That's, I have a relationship with them. I'm not ready to totally get rid of them, but I'm putting up with it. That's how relationships go. But if you come to see what these teachings tell us and you do these practices, you stop being related from person to person and you start relating from self to self. Start relating from what's real to what's real, not what's a condition and an appearance. That's a major thing. Once you wake up and you see things as they are, you accept the death of the body. You know the body's going to die, right? See, these are the facts, right? The body's going to die, and you don't know when it's going to die, right? If that's accepted, and you're sitting in front of a doctor that's going to give you a diagnosis, what are they going to tell you that's going to be upsetting? You've already accepted that you're going to die. If they tell you you're going to die, your response is going to be, yes. It's part of the process. But you see, the thing is this. That was an experience for me that really showed the value of the work, right? Because the news that I got, for most people, they would have freaked out, right? But I just said, okay, all right. And in fact, when the doctor gave me that news, she kept looking at me saying, do you have any questions? Do you have any questions? I said, no, I don't have any questions. So she probably was afraid I was going to go kill myself or something, you know? But you see, that's the kind of thing that in these teachings and practices, this is what, when something like that happens, right? Then you realize, then you have gratitude. Then you realize what you have gotten. You realize what you have gotten. So that nothing, see, if that's not going to upset you, what's going to upset you? So you're automatically understanding that you're not the body. No, I'm not automatically understanding anything because I'm not the person. I'm being myself. I don't have to do anything to be myself. I'm just being myself. I'm just being space. I'm just being space. And if I'm being space, whatever happens in that space is not going to have an effect on the space. In that situation, there was no fear that came up, right? Because I dealt with it. I dealt with my fear of death. I felt that fear. Fear is just an experience. People relate to fear as if it's something more than an experience. It's just an experience. And unfortunately, because people want to avoid fear because they associate it, the mind associates it, right? Fear means something terrible is going to happen, right? Even if it's not, right? So I don't want to be afraid because if I'm afraid, it means something terrible is going to happen. So now I'm afraid of being afraid. Now I can't let myself experience fear because if I experience fear, it will be upsetting because it means something terrible is going to happen. You see how it gets crazy fast. The thing to do to deal with fear, right, is face it. It's an experience, right? When you're afraid, give your attention to the fear wherever it's appearing in the body and just watch it and it'll go away. It'll go away. It's just an experience is all fear is. Yeah. When my head hits the pillow at night, if any thinking is going on, I am moving my attention out of that process so that I can get some rest. But I understand what you're saying because most people, when their head hits, when they go to sleep at night, they have a little neurotic session. But you know, people can't get to sleep because once you're out of the challenges of life and it's quiet and you can lay down, right? Now there's nothing to bother you from being crazy. You can just be crazy on your own now. You don't even need anybody, right? And you just lie there and be crazy. But you don't notice you're being crazy. You think it's important to worry. I should think about these things. What if this and what if that? That way I'll be prepared. That's just convoluted insanity. And it's in our language. That's why, you know, let's meet in person, right? It's in the language, in person. We don't hear people saying, let's meet embodied. No, they don't say, let's meet in person. Because when you and I are together, it's two persons, it's two personalities. And that's common language, right? That's, you know, what other way is there to meet except in person?